Greetings world. We are Anon DK. As we continue our Operation Purge to expose and destroy child trafficking rings, we will also continue to show you the information we find and the research we do. Knowledge is free. We have a sweet tooth for the United Nations, so it only felt right to begin our searches there. We have begun our investigation into the United Nations peacekeepers, known for their child sex rings and trafficking deeds across the world. The United Nations peacekeepers work with DynCorp, the Clinton Foundation, the Heritage Foundation, and many more, to funnel children into the United States and Canada and Europe for the elite to feed on. The total number of personnel serving currently in so-called peacekeeping operations is 100,622. India is one of the largest contingents of peacekeeper troops. It has 8,102 of the 100,622 peacekeepers in uniform. Another of the largest contributors of uniformed personnel to the UN are Pakistan, which has more than 8,750 in United Nations operations. Bangladesh has over 9,000 personnel. United Nations peacekeepers use candy and food to lure children to them, in order to rape them. The children cannot say no because they are starving. The children are typically in refugee camps due to poverty, violence, and disease, war created by the elites, to carry out these acts, without anyone looking. While the world watches ISIS and worries about the fake immigration crisis, formed and carried out by the CIA, the same people get away with kidnapping children, murdering families who speak out or try to fight, murdering researchers who go to find these trafficking rings to bring them to an end. Those who fight for freedom, those who fight for truth, are silenced just like the innocent unspoken. So the world continues to ignore these children. They are those without a voice, those without a defender, those who will never be heard or seen, the innocents destroyed. So in Operation Purge we will give those children a voice, and with your help, we will give them freedom too. The peacekeepers preyed on the weak, for they are cowards. They must destroy everything innocent. Beware those who come in the name of peace. Peace will never be given by those who do so. The United Nations peacekeepers have stated their excuses for their actions. They have said, that is what happens in war. We strongly disagree. That is not what happens in war. People do not do these acts simply because they have a weapon in their hands. The negative frequency that comes of doing the acts these people do go against our natural frequency. Raping, murdering, and kidnapping and selling children are not normal human acts. This is not a product of war. It is a product of the individual decision to perform these acts, an individual choice, free will that we all have. They decide to rape children. They choose to sell them, to murder their families, to keep everyone silent. But let us not waste time explaining it. We will show you. One girl's testimony is as follows. This child was 14. This perfect, beautiful child was raped by 11 peacekeepers, sent from the United Nations to help the struggling and dying people. This starving innocent child had sex with the soldiers every day in exchange for money, in exchange for cookies, and in exchange for juice. Do you have something to drink right now? Or do you have to be fucked first? I did not even have breasts, said a girl who was forced to have sex with an estimated 50 peacekeepers over a period of 3 years, between the ages of 12 and 15. One of them paid her 75 cents. He must be uncomfortable being a pedophile and child rapist. Money fixes everything, it seems. A young boy was 15 when he was first sexually abused by a UN peacekeeper. Over the next 3 years, he was forced to have sex with over 100 Sri Lankan peacekeepers, on average 4 times per day. Think about that. Imagine what that must be like. That is real. One boy confessed to being raped by more than 20 Sri Lankan peacekeepers. Most would remove their name tags before taking him to United Nations military trucks, where he gave them oral sex or was sodomized by them. 114 UN peacekeepers from Port-au-Prince, Haiti are known to be involved in child trafficking, including involvement with the Clinton sex rings. These pedophiles were from Bangladesh, Brazil, Jordan, Nigeria, Pakistan, Uruguay and Sri Lanka, according to UN data and interviews. If anyone could trust that nonsense, no one was imprisoned. No one ever is. After all, who believes children? Right. No one protects them either. So what are they to do? How can we expect them to have a hope? Peacekeepers from Sri Lanka are also documented as involved in the sexual abuse and exploitation of Haitians, working with the Clinton Foundation. This is not some small-time once-in-a-while operation. This is every day. Hidden well, because those who are running the trafficking rings are the same in control of the judges, the media, the governments, the banks, all working together. So they run rampant, devouring all they see. An 11-year-old boy was gang raped by a group of Uruguayan UN peacekeepers. They filmed their actions on a cell phone. The video ended up going viral. But despite this important piece of evidence, none of the child rapists went to trial in Haiti, and only 4 of the 5 were convicted of private violence in Uruguay, a minor charge. Officials spun the video as a prank gone wrong. How quick we are to deny what we do not wish to see, to stay comfortable in our complacency, allowing this to continue while we sit on ourselves for stuffing our faces with food and our minds with more TV programming. Another pedophile ring is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, run by the Anon police officers in Bosnia were caught trafficking young women from Eastern Europe, which we discussed in an earlier video. In this one we are focusing on the children. However, it is in such poverty mothers become willingly sell their children into these rings to feed themselves. What type of humanity causes these things? Only the elite, who use their money and power to control and destroy us on every level, to break us all down, to extinguish hope, life, and above all, truth. The UN was also involved with child sexual abuse and rape in the Central African Republic, and the list goes on and on. Before we continue, we will note, the numbers of children trafficked into sex cannot be found or estimated with any accuracy. Many like to make charts and statistics so it does not look so bad. If people think the majority of children are sold into work slavery, emotions subside and people are alright with it. They do not think these children, all of them, are sex slaves. They are all raped. They are all property and are used as such. Keep your eyes open. Keep that in mind as we continue. The numbers here can only be taken as small estimations at best. Also, we have exposed the United Nations and what they believe and do in our previous video. The links will be in the description. We strongly recommend, if you do not know what the United Nations is, and what it does, that you take the time to watch. Know your enemy.
4 underage girls say they were sexually abused by UN peacekeepers. The UN has launched an investigation.
I cannot put into words how anguished and angered and ashamed I am by recurrent reports over the years of sexual exploitation and abuse by UN forces.
These allegations came to light in 2014 following claims that international troops serving as peacekeepers in the CAR had sexually abused a number of young children in exchange for food or money.
International peacekeeping forces faced fresh child sex abuse accusations on Thursday. The NGO-run Code Blue campaign claimed that in 2014, a member of France's peacekeeping force, the Sangaris, tied up and undressed 4 victims and forced them into performing bestial acts. The unconfirmed allegations have sickened the international community and prompted the UN to expand its investigation.
Allegations concerning Sangaris are, sometimes you run out of words. Shocking to the core. but at this point we're not able to confirm the reports that we've seen.
The UN has interviewed 108 new victims of alleged sexual abuse between 2013 to 2015, the majority of whom are minors. For months, the international body has been plagued with dozens of allegations of child rape and other abuses by its peacekeepers.
We must acknowledge the abandoned children, 12 to 15 years old, who lived every day with hunger. They were lured by peacekeepers with cookies and snacks. The high price of this food was sexual abuse. According to Paisley Dodds of the Associated Press, the children were passed from soldier to soldier. One boy was gang raped in 2011 by peacekeepers who disgustingly filmed it on a cell phone. What do we say to these kids? Did these peacekeepers keep them safe?
What's actually happening? Why is it that this is so easy for these peacekeepers to be sold children? I mean, it's really disgusting.
Well, it is disgusting. And, of course the UN condemns it every time anyone says anything about it. They've been condemning it for decades and nothing ever changes. It is just appalling to me that people who are there, you see on your screen the blue helmets, the people who are there to protect, that's what their role is, peacekeepers, to protect the women and the children and the innocent people in these war-torn countries, are the ones who are actually then taking advantage. For a bottle of water or a candy bar, they are trading sexual favors with children. 12 and 13-year-old girls and boys in some cases. And what does the UN do? They say, oh, we have a zero tolerance policy. Well, is that working? That hasn't worked for years, so you need to change and do something different than just tell peacekeepers, don't sexually abuse children. Does anybody really need to be told, don't sexually abuse children? Does anyone do any psychological evaluations on them to see who they are? Because just because you're in a war-torn country doesn't make you become a child abuser.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way. It's like the porn defense. I've had a lot of defendants say, well, I started with adult porn and that just wasn't enough for me, so I went to child porn, as if somehow adult porn is to blame or is a natural progression to child pornography. That's absurd. So these people were already, at least in their hearts and minds, child sexual abusers.
Victims have been given deadly cholera strains when being sexually abused. One specific strain has been linked to Nepalese peacekeepers who killed approximately 10,000 people. Of course, we can track diseases and who they kill because they are manufactured to target specific DNA and genetic codings. Then they are planted on those it is to affect. This is not a new tactic. They have been doing it since they created the Black Plague. But do not be so naive as to think these things are not connected. The famines, the diseases, the trafficking, the people put into power, all used by the elite who control the United Nations. And as we have exposed to you before, they are alchemists. They study black magic and worship fear, and suffering, and death, because they are Luciferians. If you do not understand the mentality of the occult, then learn. They are the dark side saying they are the light and playing you all for fools. They are the wolves in sheepskin. It is the mentality that you are controlled by, and programmed into. You do not even know that your mind is programmed in a cult, and most of you would foolishly proclaim you have no belief at all. But not in the occult mind where everything is opposite, not in the elite where they live by oath. Think. They all live by the same oath. This is not hidden, but you have been programmed to deny truth and to hide it from your conscious mind. To automatically look away from certain things. You have been programmed to deny. With everything in you. Deny. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres stated, "Let us declare in one voice. We will not tolerate anyone committing or condoning sexual exploitation and abuse. We will not let anyone cover up these crimes with the UN flag." Of course, there is only one voice in the United Nations saying this. And it is his own. Because he is a poster child. A speaker to the masses. Only there to keep you distracted from what they do. This is not new, and the United Nations has been exposed with running sex rings for many decades. Still no one has done anything until now. Maybe it is just our lucky day. We are not afraid of truth. Nor do we shrink away when we must act on it. From a legal perspective, which is under their control, the UN has no jurisdiction over peacekeepers, so the organization California not exactly put them on trial. Convenient, is it what? United Nations promises again, just like last decade, they would not condone child trafficking or sexual exploitation of anyone. It is not children alone who are sold, bought, raped, kidnapped, and murdered by this group. Regardless, they do nothing to stop it. They do all they can to spread it. 100 girls in the Central African Republic were sexually assaulted by international peacekeepers. At least 3 of them were tied up, undressed, and forced to have sex with a dog by a French military commander in 2014. Malida Joseph, who was raped by one peacekeeper and narrowly escaped being gang-raped in Site Soleil, said, "I would like to see my attacker face to face and tell him how he has destroyed my life. Like others, she never reported the crime. They will look at this as one big joke," she said. As far as the UN goes, they came here to protect us, but all they have brought is destruction. Madeleine Rees, the former top UN human rights official in Bosnia, states there is no mechanism to call peacekeepers to account to the code. In an article on UN peacekeeper criminal conduct, she has stated that without an enforceable code of conduct, immunity often means impunity. The victims exposed in the Bosnian peacekeepers' human trafficking in the 1990s and 2000s is much like that of the Central African Republic. Whistleblower Catherine Bolkovac, who worked for DynCorp, an organization with many fingers in the child sex trafficking rings, did much research and raising awareness on this issue before. In one of her reports she states, "Covert and now overt attempts to remove, terminate and discredit those who blow the whistle on their deeds." The terms cover-up and whistleblower are common within the walls of the United Nations and peacekeeping missions. I became aware of the sexual abuse in CAR last year while doing some consulting with international experts related to Code Blue campaign, to consider the best way to expose and disrupt the continued practice of the UN. What used to be complicity by the UN by turning a blind eye has grown into a one-eyed monster, blatantly impeding proper investigations and prosecution of crimes committed by peacekeepers. The smokescreen still lies with blaming the member states and claiming the UN has no control over disciplinary measures or prosecutions of peacekeepers from contributing states. There were many cases, but they were never prosecuted. Young girls from Romania, Ukraine, Moldova and other Eastern European countries being brought in to service the UN and military bases as sex slaves. The cases involved the officers from many countries, including the USA, Pakistan, Germany, Romania, Ukraine government contractors, and local organized criminals. The human rights investigators were never allowed to fully investigate. The suspects were immediately removed from the mission or transferred to other missions. The young women were simply sent back to their home countries. In July 1999, the Kosovo Protection Force entered Kosovo, the war-torn province of Serbia, in order to force some protection on the ethnic Albanians. More than 20,000 United Nations troops were on the ground within days of the passage of the authorizing UN Security Council resolution. Within months, the human rights community drew attention to the establishment and intensification of human sex trafficking into Kosovo. In August 2004, Amnesty International reported that young women from Eastern Europe were being abducted, drugged, sold into human trafficking rings in Kosovo. It is easy to follow the trail of the peacekeepers and their trafficking, since their creation and upon their invasion of countries. They are doing exactly what they get paid to do. After all, if they were not executing their duties fully, as they are to be carried out, if they were not doing their jobs, there would be no peacekeepers. There would be none of it. The issue the public has with this is that they have no idea what the truth is. They have no thought, They have no common sense to see through the deception or even know what it is. Those who get paid because they do their job. Whether their job is raping children, kidnapping and selling them, raping the children who come from that same life. Whatever their job is, they are doing it, all while being supported by you. You donate to charities. You support the organizations. You even send yourselves and your children to join the troops. You call these people heroes. People who rape and sell children. Countless people have exposed these things before. People pay no attention. Ted Gunderson, a former FBI special agent, uncovered years' worth of information on high-level pedophilia, sexual abuse, and satanic rituals performed by the elite. This case became known as the Franklin Files. This also exposed the Child Protection Service's involvement in their extensive child trafficking business. Former U.S. Representative Cynthia McKinney also knew about the government's involvement in human trafficking. In 2005, she grilled Donald Rumsfeld on military contractor DynCorp child trafficking business of selling women and children. Most recent exposure came from WikiLeaks' release of tens of thousands of emails from the former White House Chief of Staff under Bill Clinton, John Podesta, who also served as Hillary Clinton campaign manager. These emails showed John Podesta was a part of these child trafficking rings, satanic rituals, and much more. As it came out a decade ago, the Clintons, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein and many more are involved in the child sex trafficking ring called the Lolita Express, after the plane owned by Jeff Epstein used to transport children to rape parties. Pizzagate, which is the name given to the child trafficking ring exposed from the Podesta emails, is by no means a large operation or the only one, and definitely not the first. This has been uncovered through history for thousands of years. The difference is that today most of you are comfortable pretending it does not exist, and in generations before it was not tolerated.
Resignation of Anders Kompass is both a protest and criticism against the UN for how it handled one of the most shocking sex abuse scandals the world body has ever faced. Speaking to the Geneva-based IRIN news service, Kompass attributed the lack of accountability from the UN as one of his reasons for leaving the agency after 17 years. He also blamed the unwillingness of UN officials to express regrets over how they treated him. Kompass was earlier accused of breaching protocol and suspended from work last year for sharing a confidential UN report with French authorities. A report that detailed allegations of sexual abuse of children by French peacekeepers in the CAR between 2013 and 2014. Kompass, who was Field Operations Director at the UN's Human Rights Office, said he was frustrated by a lack of UN action to stop the abuse. An internal probe later cleared him, and an independent panel's investigation into the scandal found that peacekeepers deployed in the conflict zone had traded food or money with children as young as 9 years old in exchange for sexual favors. Now, that panel also criticized the UN for gross institutional failure after finding that complaints had been passed from office to office within the UN system with no action taken.
My personal journey into human trafficking started almost 24 years ago as a 28-year-old mother, divorced with 3 children. Perhaps even earlier, as everything I've done in my life seems to have prepared me for the next step. In 1989, I joined the Lincoln, Nebraska Police Force and graduated from the Nebraska Law Enforcement Academy. During my 10 years as a police investigator, I specialized in child sex crimes and domestic violence. I was no stranger to evildoers and violence being perpetrated against women and children. In 1999, I would be heading off to Bosnia as an international police force task member. I certainly never expected to be terminated less than 2 years later and find myself in a foreign country fighting to save my reputation as a police officer and defend my integrity and honesty against a multi-billion-dollar United States private government contractor. Since that time, I've been standing in front of audiences around the globe describing my experiences within the United Nations mission. The film and the book have allowed me to share my findings and the stories of the victims in an effort to educate the naive and expose the injustices perpetuated both abroad and here in the United States, where injustices can only be described as a disease. During my years as a UN human rights investigator, I observed many diverse and inexcusable acts. These acts included sexual harassment of female employees within the walls of the UN, government contractors and international aid workers who were becoming end users of pornography, strip clubs, and the facilitation of prostitution. I interviewed international police officers and international aid workers who admittedly purchased foreign women to keep at home as them as their girlfriends. I became aware of rape tapes being distributed by the Department of Defense contractors on military bases. I worked with Bosnian law enforcement officers who put their lives and jobs on the line when they reported cases of military and UN officials participating in the transport of young girls across international borders. I witnessed the inaction and dismissive behavior of UN officials on reports of sexual violence and sexual misconduct alleged against UN peacekeepers. I witnessed and experienced and lived the retaliation against those officials who tried to investigate and report. I listened to derogatory comments directed at the innocent who were referred to as whores of war and just prostitutes. Then I documented my findings in an email to mission officials in an attempt to educate and raise the awareness of the issue internally. I was immediately accused of being burned out, demoted, and then terminated a few months later as a final act of the United Nations and private contractor retaliation against me. A further attempt to discredit me as a police officer and honest person was brought forward when the government contractor alleged that I had falsified my timesheets. I took my employer DynCorp to task in a British employment tribunal and won my case in a unanimous decision.
And in fact, the only time that when the peacekeepers left was the only time when the trafficking really went away. And that really is a sad indictment. Everything that happened in the film is true. And I know because I was there. It's true, it didn't happen necessarily to all those characters in those same way, but what you saw happen to the girls in that film did happen. And we'll never know to how many because we were unable to keep the records. That said, naive idealist I may be, I still firmly believe in the positive nature of human beings. So that's the scene, that's the scenario. And part of the problem is that they're not screened by the UN before they go in, there's no vetting process, so we can get anybody. Then you arrive in a country which doesn't have any of this rule of law, doesn't have any sort of way in which that conduct can be regulated by the domicile population, and you have a situation where you've all got some form of diplomatic immunity under the status of forces agreements. That means with your private contractor or your UN or diplomat. So basically 24 hours a day you are protected against whatever you might do. So even if you commit a crime which is as horrific as the crimes were being committed, if the local police for whatever reason did pick you up, and at the later stage they were picking people up, within seconds your contingent commander was down, getting you out and saying you have immunity. I got very friendly with a Pakistani officer in the police, and he said when he was picked up from the plane by his contingent, before they were even taken to their barracks where they were going to be staying, they were shown where they went on the Saturday night, and it was made quite clear that everybody went there, because if you didn't go there you were not part of the lads, you were letting the team down. And he didn't, and he had all sorts of problems. I mean, lucky for him, he was 6 foot tall and a black belt in martial arts, because it was physically intimidating. And then I heard from other guys that if they wanted to, even if they weren't participating, if they said anything, it was made clear to them that their career advancement was over, they'd be ostracized. Then there's another issue which I think is important, and this is a Norwegian guy said to me, never underestimate the power of the male for cognitive dissonance. We can justify anything to ourselves. One of them is, if I'm doing it, it's better I'm doing it because at least I'm nice and I'm clean. I'm not HIV positive, so it's better that's me than anyone else. Right the way through to, they're just whores anyway, so it doesn't matter.
In June, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon announced the creation of a so-called external independent review panel. The trinity of reviewers are Marie Deschamps of Canada, Hassan Jallow of Gambia, and Yasmin Sooka of South Africa. And we have our starting place, the Lucky Three. They will attempt to examine the United Nations handling of allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse. This marks the first time the UN has commissioned such a review. We will be keeping a very close watch on them. You can see the multitude of whistleblowers and supporters who have addressed this issue before, in court, using the same system that is there to hide these things. The justice system is a joke. It protects the criminal ruling class. Who are the United Nations? Who are the child traffickers? These people control the courts. That is the only way to get away with murder every day. While these systems are still allowed to remain active, so will their decimation of us all, until the last human falls. It is simple. All the stakes to continue and grow as it has, is for people to do nothing. Not for good people to do nothing. In a world as rotten as we have allowed this one to become, there is no such thing as a good person. But there are those who stand for what is right. And there are cowards who will never amount to anything and disgrace the rest of their species. Those attacked and destroyed by them. See you give your money and support to these pedophiles. If you did not support the United Nations, the peacekeepers would not be flooding in to destroy countries, families and lives. The innocent would not be raped daily. They would not have been taken from their home and sold. They would not have been murdered. But while you continue to allow it, to support the good cause, your heroes, you allow it to continue. You support it. You support the elite pedophiles. You support them kidnapping your children. You support them raping your children. You support them and all they do. Because of your complacency, you allow it all to continue every moment of the day. If you did not, you would do something to stop it. How can we help when none come forward? We will go to them. In Operation Purge, we are going to dig out the traffickers. We will find them out. We will go to them, delete their businesses, save the children, and all those involved, and destroy the elite. There is no way of knowing the hundreds of thousands and millions of people, humans, made to suffer from this. The victims are silenced and nothing ever happens to pedophiles, until we look for them, and find them. You have a decision to make. Time is up. What side are you on? Will you join us and stop this from continuing? Will you save children's lives, and the lives of countless others? Will you do what is right, or are you just another empty coward? The same as the peacekeepers who only preyed on the weak, and the innocent. If you are not afraid to do what is right, join us. If you are, expect us.